Okay, we are live. Good evening to those that are here. Good evening to those online. Welcome to another amazing episode of Outlandish Talmud Stories and Outstanding Life Lessons. Lesson 29, titled, May You Learn from a Heretic. I want to thank tonight's sponsors, Dr. Jacob and Joanna Kirsch, for sponsoring in honor of Joanna's birthday. Mazal tov to you, Joanna. May Hashem bless you with a beautiful, healthy, happy new year, together with your beautiful family, lots of nachas from your children, lots of continued success for you and your husband. God bless you. If you want to dedicate one of these classes, which really helps us what we're doing, there's a link in the source sheet, in the description, and you can do that online. I hope you're also downloading the source sheet for tonight. It's in the video description. We are studying tonight some outlandish Talmud stories, as we always do, with some outstanding life lessons. It's a number of different stories from a number of different places. So I've prepared a lot for tonight. I've been very ambitious. I hope we'll get through everything or more, but we'll do our best. So, a bit of background. For those that joined last class, it was 2 weeks ago. If you didn't, that's fine, because today is something new. But 2 weeks ago, 2 classes ago, we learned about the 4 rabbis who entered into the Pardes, entered into the orchard. The Pardes was another name for heaven. They wanted to see what's going on the other side. Now, should you ever be trying to figure out what's going on the other side? Better not. Well, these 4 rabbis wanted to do it, so they ascended into heaven. Ben Zoima, Ben Azai, Elisha ben Avuya, and Rabbi Akiva. What happened to them? So we learned Ben Zoima went crazy. He died. Ben Azai went crazy. Elisha ben Avuya became a heretic. He became an apostate. The Talmud says, Kitzis ben Atias. He chopped down the trees of the orchard. And he stopped believing in one God, believed in many gods, he had other kinds of beliefs, and he became known as Acher. Acher is the outcast, the other person. We don't want to mention his name. And one of them was Rabbi Akiva, as the Talmud says, Yatza b'shalom v'nichnas b'shalom. He entered in peace and he left in peace. He survived the ordeal. That was 2 weeks ago. Last class, we learned about Acher. Who was Acher? What was his story? How could it be that one of the greatest sages in our history just left the faith and stopped believing in God? And more than that, Acher became a very destructive person to the Jewish people. When are we talking about over here? We're talking about during and after the destruction of the Second Temple, towards the end of the 1st century, after the Common Era. Acher is a colleague of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, many of the great rabbis you've probably heard about. He too was a great rabbi. But when he left, he became an ally, a partner with the Romans. And we learned some stories last week, how he would walk into the Bet Midrash, into the study halls, and he would try to lure the students away from studying Torah and to go pursue other secular professions. And he even partnered with the Romans in killing many of the Jews. A lot of their efforts in eradicating Torah mitzvot. Shabbat, for example, the Romans outlawed Shabbat. That was a lot of it. Acher was very involved with that. We said stories last week. And he caused a lot of death and destruction to Jewish people as well. There are theories that he may have been involved with the Asara Harugi Malchus, the 10 martyrs who were killed by the Romans. Famously, we don't have anything clear about that. So this is Acher. It's a tragic story how such a great person becomes such a renegade. We don't even say his name. He's an outcast. He's an outlier. He's somebody we don't want to talk about. Although, as we spoke about last week, we do talk about him. It's not like he's eradicated from the Talmud altogether. The Talmud does quote him as Acher, but for some reason, it's important to tell his story. And that's what we discussed last class. You can look it up online. Now we get into the topic of this week. You can imagine when Acher becomes Acher, that everyone wants to stay far away from him with a 10-foot pole. No one wants to get near him. It's a tragedy. He was the greatest sage. It says when everyone used to study from him, when he used to talk in the Bet Midrash, everyone kept quiet. Everyone came from all the 4 corners and listened to him only. They left their other teachers and listened to him. His words were precious. His Torah was beautiful. But he became an apostate. He became a heretic. He stopped believing in God. He left the Jewish community. He brought destruction to the Jewish community. So everybody, all these friends, all these colleagues, all these students, everybody leaves him, of course, except for one person. And that's the subject of tonight. One person was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, who was a student of him, who was a student of Rabbi Akiva, and also a student of Acher. He stays together with him as a student. And he still treats Acher as a kind of rabbi, his teacher. Why? How could he do that? Now, lest you want to say that Rabbi Meir was just a low-level, simple student, he didn't know any better, or maybe a rabble-rouser, those people that want to align with the underdogs and with the outcasts. And no, that wasn't Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was also one of the greatest of sages that we know about. Who was Rabbi Meir? We once learned about him in a class a few months ago because he was the famous Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes. He was the miracle maker, right? And there's a lot of stories in the Talmud, the miracles he did. And then we learned about him a few weeks later, about how he used to learn from names. The person's name said a lot about their story, and he made miracles there. Rabbi Meir was known to be a very great tzaddik. Rabbi Meir, he was a sofer, he was a scribe. That's an important thing to remember because we're going to come across that later in the class. So he knew the whole Torah by heart, and he used to write it down by heart. Rabbi Meir, his wife was Beruria. Beruria was a very great woman. We're going to probably get us to a story about her towards the end of the class. She was the daughter of Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion, another great sage who was sadly one of the 10 martyrs who was tragically killed in a very gruesome way by the Romans. Rabbi Meir, he's probably mentioned one of the most times in the Talmud, almost more than any other sage in the Talmud. Rabbi Meir, very often the law is like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, as we're going to learn the first source in a moment, he was a tremendous, tremendous person. Everyone looked up to him. Everybody learned from him. And yet, this great Rabbi Meir continues, unlike everyone else, he continues to remain a student of this apostate, of this Acher, this person who left the community, left God, and actually connects with the Romans to bring destruction to the Jewish people. How did he do this, and why did he do this? And that's the topic of tonight's class. You ready? So let's go to the first source. We're going to figure out who was Acher. Okay? So this is from Talmud Eruvin 13b. The Talmud says, Rabbi Acha, the son of Hanina, said, "It is revealed and known before the one who spoke, and the world came into being." In other words, before God. In the generation of Rabbi Meir, there was no one equal to him. If that's the case, why then didn't the sages establish the halakha according to his opinion? Very often, sometimes the law is like him, but sometimes he has an opinion and the law is not like him. But if he was the greatest in his generation, the law should always be like him. So the Talmud answers, because his colleagues were unable to ascertain the profundity of his opinion. He was too clever for everybody. When he said something, nobody understood what he's saying. He was so deep, he was so profound. So we can't even rule the halakha like him because we don't really understand what you're saying. It's too much for us. As you're going to see, it's too much light for us. Rabbi Meir was a source of light. What would he do? Listen what he would do. He would state with regards to a ritually impure item that it's pure and display justification for that ruling. And then with regards to a ritually pure item, it's impure and display justification for the ruling. In other words, a question came to the court, is this item tamei, tahor, pure, impure? Rabbi Meir could lecture for a whole hour why it's pure. Oh, so it's pure. Then he would lecture for a whole hour why it's impure. Oh, so it's impure. So which one is it? Tamei, tahor? Now he was brilliant. He could present any case he wanted because he had a mastership of a Torah more than anybody else. But we, the students, the people, his colleagues, we couldn't understand what he was saying. We never knew, is he just arguing the other side? Is he actually stating the law? So because he was too deep for us, we couldn't rule the halakha like him. In fact, it was taught in the Breita. Rabbi Meir was not his name. That's not his real name. Rather, his real name was Rabbi Nehorai. You ever heard of Nehorai? I know some people that have that name. So why was he called Meir? Why was he called Rabbi Meir? Because he illuminates, Meir, the eyes of the sages in matters of halakha. Meir means to light up. He says something, brought light to the room, light to people's minds, light to the Torah. Now, by the way, Nehora also comes from the word light. Nehora in Aramaic is light. So he already had a name called light. Why do you have to change the name to Meir? So Nehora means he's a light. He was illuminated for himself. Meir means he illuminated others. So this that he was a Nehora, he was an enlightened person, fine. No. But more than that, he brought light to everybody. When you were studying something and maybe you understood it, but it wasn't so clear, or maybe you didn't understand it, and you spoke. Some people, you speak to them, they throw in an idea, they throw in a word, they just bring light to a whole topic, right? They see deep. They see layers that people are not seeing, and they get to the very heart of the issue, and they say something. Now I get it. That was Rabbi Meir. He brought light to the whole Torah to everybody. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said, the fact that I am more wise than all my colleagues, you know why? Where do I get my wisdom from? Due to the fact that I saw Rabbi Meir from behind. Meaning, he sat in his class, but where did he sit? There was no seat for him in the front of the teacher, so he sat here, behind the teacher. Now, when you sit behind the teacher, what do you see? The teacher's back. I saw Rabbi Meir's back, and because I saw his back, not just I heard the Torah that he was teaching, but I saw his back, just seeing his holy, godly image, that made me wiser than everyone else. Had I seen him from the front, if I could have a seat like you're having a seat, and I would see his face and his front, I would be even more wise. As the Torah says, it's brought down in the book of Isaiah, Yeshaya, your eyes shall see your teacher. There's a certain level of wisdom that comes from seeing the teacher. When you hear an audio of a class or you see the class being given, it's very different. Even though you're hearing the same thing, but a lot of the communication, a lot of the wisdom is being expressed not just through the audio, but also through the facial gestures, the features, the body movements, the hands, the vibe, the energy, right? So a lot of the seeing the face of a person brings greater depth to what you're learning from the person. So that's how holy Rabbi Meir was. That Rabbi Yehuda said that because I saw him from the back, it made me wiser than everyone else. If I would sit at the front, I'd be even wiser. That's Rabbi Meir we're talking about. Question has come up. Is it maybe Rabbi Meir, the reason why he remained a student from Acher is because he thought maybe he could return him to, and maybe he was the only one. He's saying two things. Number one, that he'd be the only one not be influenced by Acher. Number two, maybe he could influence him. So that's a good point that we're going to touch on today. It's more than that, but that's something that I want to consider. Very good points. Which, by the way, you're already getting into it's a conversation we need to have about the dangers of associating with a teacher or with a colleague that is, from a spiritual sense, that's off the cliff. Okay, I mean, even not from a religious, spiritual sense, but in any sense, if somebody's a crook, somebody's a criminal, someone's a nasty person, somebody, the Mishnah says, "Harchek mishachen ra," always distance yourself from a bad neighbor. Don't get involved with the wrong crowd, because even if you think, yeah, my friends are lousy, but I can still be a mensch, I can still be a good guy, it can only last so long. We are very influenced by our friends around us, and especially by our teachers, because teachers, if we really want to be a student to a teacher, we're making ourselves vulnerable because we are absorbing the wisdom or the lesson from the teacher. So what kind of influence does the teacher have over students? Number one, the wisdom they're imparting. And then you have to know that the wisdom is a correct wisdom, what's coming from the right source. And number two, not just the wisdom, but also there's the energy and the vibe and the influence and the lifestyle and all the other things that are being imparted, whether overtly, verbally, or whether subconsciously, but it's all coming from the teacher. So you need to be very careful about the kind of people you surround yourself with and the kind of teachers you choose for yourself, because of how impressionable we are by other people. Which all the more begs the question, how could a mayor choose to stay the students of Acher? And you're bringing up an interesting point, which we're going to touch on as well. Before we get into the actual how and why Rabbi Meir could do this, I want to show you some examples from the Talmud. The Talmud says stories about Rabbi Meir's relationship with Acher throughout his life. Okay? So let's go to the second source, Talmud Chagiga 15a. There are some stories here that are fascinating. You have to try to imagine a very great tzaddik, a great rabbi, who leaves the community, becomes excommunicated, so to speak, and everyone's embarrassed to know them and associate with them, but there's one person that sticks with them. Think about how much Rabbi Meir had to sacrifice, and think about the way he was mocked, or the way he was ridiculed by his own colleagues. How could you hang out with him? How could you alone with him? Don't you know what he's done? And Rabbi Meir stood by him. Let's learn some stories. So the sages taught. There was an incident involving Acher, who was riding a horse on Shabbat. Now, riding a horse on Shabbat is not a biblical violation, but it's a rabbinic violation. You're not allowed to ride a horse on Shabbat. He was still doing that, right? Because he didn't care about the halacha, about the Torah. There's actually a similar story, or a different version of the story, in the Jerusalem Talmud, which we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. He was riding the horse on Shabbat, which was Yom Kippur also. And he was riding it by the Holy of Holies, by the Temple Mount. Which, by the way, it's one thing when you leave the community, you're not interested in Torah and mitzvot anymore, and you go ride your horses on Shabbat, and you go, violate Shabbat. Fine. And where do you go? You don't live in the Jewish community anymore. You go move to Eilat, and you go move to wherever. But why is he coming to the heart of the Jewish community, to the Temple Mount, to Jerusalem, to Rabbi Meir's yeshiva, and riding on his horse? So he had this tension. Whether it's a tension, meaning I'm violating the Shabbat, I'm violating the Torah, but it's hard for me to tear myself away from where I grew up and where I truly belong. Or maybe he was trying to prove even a bigger point. I'm gonna step on you and your community and everything you hold, and I want you to see me that way. Okay? So picture the scene. He's riding on this horse on Shabbat, and Rabbi Meir was walking behind him to learn Torah from him. This guy violating Shabbat, and everyone stays far away. Rabbi Meir is walking alongside him. Rabbi Meir is walking, it's Shabbat, and his teacher is violating Shabbat, riding a horse, but he's teaching him Torah. Let that sink in for a moment. Today it would be the equivalent of a great rabbi who's left the Jewish community, and he's driving a car on Shabbat with the window open, and the yeshiva student, is walking along the car, listening to the Torah being taught by this person inside the car on Shabbat. Imagine that. Now, it gets better. After a while, Acher said to him, Meir, turn back. For I've already estimated and measured according to the steps of my horse that the Shabbat boundary ends here, and you may therefore venture no further. There's a law called Tchum Shabbat, which means you're only allowed to walk up to 200 mil, about a kilometer, a little more, outside the city, and that's the border. You can't walk further than that on Shabbat. It's too much labor. It's not Shabbosdik to sort of travel on Shabbat. So therefore, the rabbis made this limitation how far you can walk. So Acher on the horse says, Rabbi Meir, we have now reached the Tchum. You can't walk any further. You need to stop here. And so Acher is riding on the horse outside the Tchum, teaching Torah, and Rabbi Meir is staying inside the Tchum, because that's what the law says, learning Torah from his teacher. Rabbi Meir said to him, you too, return to the correct path. You're telling me I have to stay here. You also come here. You come back. He said to him, but have I not already told you that I already heard behind the dividing curtain? Return, rebellious children, apart from Acher. We learned about this a couple weeks ago. A heavenly voice came out from heaven and said, Shuvu banim shovavim, my wayward, my rebellious children, return with teshuvah. Chutz mi Acher. Everyone can return except for Acher. Acher is not allowed to return. He can't do teshuvah. That's what he heard, and he felt like it's a message from God that he has no chance of returning. So we studied more about that idea in the previous class. But Rabbi Meir doesn't give up on him. There's actually an interesting lesson in this story, strange story. The Tchum, the borderline for Shabbat. What's the idea over here? Because the spiritual life and the religious life and the discipline life, you need to have borders. You need to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, in relationships, in all of your activities. You eat, drink, sleep, However you're engaging with people, with the world, there needs to be healthy boundaries. What's healthy for you, and then beyond the boundary, what's unhealthy for you. Where you should expose yourself or where you should not expose yourself. What you should experience, what you should not experience. How much should you indulge, how much don't you indulge? Right? You need to have people who struggle with boundaries, struggle in many health matters. Could be food, could be people, right? They may sort of be vulnerable to many abuses from other people. And may they get into another bad relationship, another bad relationship, another bad boss, another bad boss. What's going on over here? Why is this a pattern in your life? So there's many things going on with this person, but they don't have the proper boundaries. And the symbolism here is Acher is telling Rabbi Meir, this is your boundary. The boundary of halacha. Halacha is a healthy boundary. You want to live a spiritually healthy life, you keep to the boundaries of halacha. When you follow the Torah, do this, don't do that, eat this, don't eat that, go here, don't go there, etc. You are in a healthy zone. And to violate or to cross the threshold over that is an unhealthy place to be. And Acher is telling Rabbi Meir, you stay here. I'm already gone. I'm finished. I'm not healthy. But you stay here. Okay. Rabbi Meir is not giving up on him so quickly. So he takes hold of him and he brings him to the study hall. Seeing how much time we have. All right, we're going to skip this paragraph. Maybe we'll get back to it. Go to the next paragraph, page 2. The Gemara relates, when Acher passed away, the heavenly court declared that he should not be judged nor brought into the world to come. The soul of Acher comes to heaven. What do you do to the soul? On the one hand, they said, well, we can't send him to Gehenom, to hell, because he has so much Torah. And the Torah protects him. We can't send him to heaven because he led a sinful, rebellious life. So what do we do with him? Normally, for every soul, there's a solution. Either you get into heaven right away, or you have to go through some cleansing. Go through some cleansing in Gehenom and you'll come. With him, we didn't know what to do. Kavannah is another cleansing process. But with Acher, he had so much Torah to him, the Torah protects him, we didn't know what to do. So in the end, he stays in the middle. He sits on top of the fence. Now, you know, sitting on top of the fence is a very uncomfortable place to be. But we didn't know what to do with him. He was like a lost soul. So, his student, Rabbi Meir, wants to help him. He should not be judged in manner befitting his deeds because he occupied himself with Torah. And he should not be brought into the world to come because he sinned. Rabbi Meir said, it's better that he be judged properly and be brought in the world to come. Rabbi Meir said, send him to hell. Send him to Gehenom. Send him to the purgatory cleansing, kafakela, all the different. It's so painful. It's so difficult. How could you pray that someone should go through that? Rabbi Meir said, because at least that way he'll get cleansed. And one day, he'll be able to leave and come into heaven. Staying in the middle of nowhere is not a solution. There's no pain, but there's no grandiose benefit of being in heaven. Send him to Gehenom. Like this, he'll eventually come to heaven. When I die, says Rabbi Meir, I will cause smoke to rise up from his grave as a sign that he's being sentenced in Gehenom. You'll see what I'm praying for is true. When I die, the smoke coming out of his grave will be a sign. Sure enough, when Rabbi Meir passed away, smoke rose up from the grave of Acher, implying that his wish was granted. So right now, the student, not a nice thing to do to your teacher, to send them to Gehenom. But Rabbi Meir understood this is the right thing for him. It's good for him. And Rabbi Meir's wish was granted. Rabbi Yochanan said, was this a mighty deed on Rabbi Meir's behalf to burn his teacher? Not a nice thing. And he's sort of feeling a little guilty. He says, could it be there was one sage among us who left the path and we cannot save him? How did we let this happen? How did we let Acher become Acher? We, the rabbis, his friends, his colleagues, why were we there to protect him? We could have done more for him. And now Nebuch, he's being burnt because of his student, Rabbi Meir. He said, when I die, I'm going to have the smoke extinguished from his grave as a sign that I've managed to pull him out of Gehenom, out of hell, and brought him into heaven. Indeed, when Rabbi Yochanan passed away, the smoke stopped coming out of the grave. And a certain eulogizer, when Rabbi Yochanan passed away at his funeral, somebody got up to eulogize him, one of his colleagues, and they said, Even the guard at the entrance could not stand before you, our Rabbi. There's a guard guarding Gehenom, who comes in, who goes out. Rabbi Yochanan, when he went up to heaven, he went to Gehenom and he said, give me Acher, time to pull him out. Now the guard probably wanted to say, no, he belongs here. But Rabbi Yochanan was stronger. He could pull anyone out of Gehenom and send them to heaven. He was stuck. And now, according to this narrative, now by the way, you're asking a good question because not everyone agrees. But according to this narrative, Rabbi Yochanan pulled him into heaven. But he went through a rough time till he got there. So that's the thing. So normally we say, even if a person needs to be cleansed, the maximum cleansing is 11 months. Which is why we only say Kaddish for a person for 1 day less than 11 months. Meaning the worst Rasha, the biggest sinner, in 11 months can be cleaned in Gehenom and be purified and be brought into heaven. When our loved one passes away, we don't want to assume they're the biggest Rasha, so we say Kaddish for 1 day less than 11 months for them. You know that? Now you do. Okay, but Acher apparently spent many years there. I don't know the amount of years when Rabbi passed there, Rabbi Yochanan passed there, but it was more than 11 months. And Acher, it seemed like could have stayed there forever. A guy like that maybe never could be cleansed enough to be sent to heaven. But Rabbi Yochanan pulled him out. There's no time? There's time. Yeah. It's a different kind of time, but there's time. There's before and after. That's time. Only by God, before any world, is there no time. But all worlds, physical or spiritual worlds, they have place and they have time. Spiritual place, spiritual time. It's not the same as physical place and time. But there's time. Cause and effect, before and after. So, as you can see, Rabbi Meir is very involved with Acher. And he's a fan of it. He'll do anything for it. Was Rabbi, you're asking, did Rabbi Meir maybe use Acher to strengthen himself? In other words, he's saying an interesting point. He's saying, could a healthy person reinforce their health by familiarizing themselves or even associating themselves with an unhealthy person, knowing what not to do, what to keep away from? So that's an interesting thing. I mean, think about it in your own life. Is it good to befriend and be around unhealthy people, and like this you can know what not to do and learn from their mistakes? Or that's very difficult and maybe unhealthy for you. So something to think about. Something to think about. So it could reinforce his own faith, or you can imagine Acher, who has a completely different faith now. He doesn't believe in monotheism, in one God anymore. What does he believe in? There's different opinions. Maybe he believed in dualism, and he became agnostic, or maybe, like at that time, it was very popular, the Zoroastrianism, the different gods. So he became a pagan. He should be more fearful that Acher would try to influence him. There are some narratives that say that Acher tried to influence Rabbi Meir at certain times. And there's a lot of dialogue in the Talmud going back and forth with each other. Possibly Acher was trying to seduce Rabbi Meir into some of his beliefs. Rabbi Meir did hold strong. Was it because of him? Was it in spite of him? Right? We're going to actually learn more about that in a moment. Yeah, look, let's pause for a moment. Go to page 3. There's a passage from the Jerusalem Talmud. So I mentioned last time that there's two main sources for all of these stories. One is the Babylonian Talmud, and one is the Jerusalem Talmud. And there's some of the same stories, different versions, some different stories. But here you have an interesting dialogue between them. It says, Rabbi Meir was sitting and expounding in the house of study in Tiberia, right? Where's Rabbi Meir Balanez buried? In Tiberia, in Tiberias. That's where he lived. That's where his yeshiva was. So he was teaching Torah, and Elisha passed by in the street, again, riding on a horse on Shabbat. So they told Rabbi Meir, Elisha, your teacher, is outside riding his horse on Shabbat. Probably though making fun of him. Look who's here, your teacher riding the horse on Shabbat. So he went out. Elisha asked him, Rabbi, what was the topic of your sermon today? So Rabbi said, how do you explain the verse that says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning of it? What does that mean? So he said, well, what do you say? Rabbi responded, here's my interpretation. You have, for example, the man who acquires a stock of goods in his youth, then loses all his money, but in his old age, he eventually makes a profit out of it, right? He hangs in there, he hangs onto the stock for 40 years, and everyone's telling him, you're crazy, you lost our parents, right? At least cut your losses, right? But 40 years later, this thing skyrocketed, and he made a fortune. Or another example, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, right? You have a man who begets children in his youth, and they die. Then he begets children in his old age, and they survive. Another example, you have a man who commits evil deeds in his youth, but in his old age performs good deeds. Another example, you have the man who learns Torah in his youth and forgets it, but in his old age he returns to it. Rabbi is saying, a lot of times, just because in the beginning it starts off a certain way, just because in the beginning you didn't do well in business and you lost all the money on the stock, in the beginning you forgot all your Torah, or in the beginning you spent a sinful life, don't think that that is the end of the story. Don't think that defines you. But you can rebound later in life, and the rebounding later in life, making the money, you're learning the Torah, returning with the Shabbat, having the children later, that can outweigh. Those profits can outweigh the losses earlier in life. What's Rabbi Meir hinting to him? He's telling him, Achir, it's time. And don't think your story's over. But Elisha didn't accept that interpretation. He said, that's not how your teacher Akiva explained it. He said opposite. He said, good is the end of a thing when it's good from its beginning. Something that ends good is good or only good if it starts off good as well. If it starts off faulty, the good ending is not such a good thing. Okay. I don't want to get into this story and this interpretation, but I'll just bring it as an example of the way they used to dialogue with each other, as an example of something that you mentioned, that Rabbi Meir probably tried to use the relationship to try to bring him back. And I was the student is being a bit of a teacher, right? And yeah. You're saying that Rabbi Meir, the shame and the ridicule he probably endured in this world helped him, relieved him of pain and kind of punishment in the world to come, right? Sometimes we say that the righteous people suffer in this world because they can prosper and benefit more in the world to come. And vice versa, the wicked might prosper in this world and lose out all of their fortune in the world to come, and they suffer in the world to come. Right? There is such a concept. You're saying Rabbi did that deliberately? Or God orchestrated it? God orchestrated that. Okay. All right. That's interesting. Yeah, Benny, we're going to repeat the questions. I'm trying to repeat them, but I'm going to do that. And Gary, perhaps Rabbi Meir thought he could influence and bring Achim back from the dark side. So very good, Gary. That's what seems to be something going on over here. And you see, I just brought one example from the Outlandish Talmud about one conversation they had, but there's many more conversations where Rabbi Meir is trying to slip in something to give strength to Elisha ben Avuya again, but he always rejects it and he says that God does not want me. And we discussed last time more what that means. So is it the question is coming, is it an avera to hang out with somebody who's a Machal Shabbos, who violates Shabbos? It's not an avera. not a sin to be a friend of someone who violates Shabbos. It's wrong to support. It's wrong. Well, it's wrong to support their ways. It's wrong to glorify their ways. It's wrong to condone their ways. But now the question is being with them or befriending them a sign of support, strengthening, condoning it, or is it a tool? If I'm close with them, maybe, just maybe, I can influence them. Right? So it's a tricky thing. Now, I also don't believe that we need to be God's policeman. Now, if he's violating Shabbos, it's not my problem. Meaning, of course, it's my problem because we're all connected to each other, and we love each other, and we care about each other. If somebody's doing something very unhealthy, smoking drugs and eating, right? Do I care about that person? Should I try to stop them, or say no, live and let live, whatever? It's your body, your life. You do what you want. On the one hand, do what you want. I can't force you. On the other hand, I love you. I care about you. I want to help you. So now the question is, if I stay a friend of yours, what's going to happen? Will I be able to, first of all, remain healthy myself? Second of all, maybe I can also influence you. Or third of all, will I become influenced by you? It's a question we need to think about. Right? As parents of young children, we always want them to have good friends. If they go to a friend's house and in the house they're watching all kinds of inappropriate movies or books, or they speak. We don't want our children going to their homes. Why? Because they're very impressionable at that age. But later in life, to have a friend who is somebody who's not doing very well, but encourage them to help them, and at least they have one good friend that gives them at least some kind of hope in life. If you also leave them and they have no good friends in life, there's no hope for them. Okay. Now, what's the time? All right. Now, I want to get into the real point that I want to get through tonight. How could Rabbi do this? It's more than just trying to influence Elisha. It's much deeper, and there's an amazing lesson that we're going to learn from it. It's a lesson about Rabbi Meir, but it's a lesson for all of us as well. So the Gemara continues. We're back on page 2. Yeah? Paragraph 4. The Gemara asks, and Rabbi Meir, how could he learn Torah from the mouth of Acher? But didn't Rabbi, the son of Chana, say, that Rabbi Yochanan said, what's the meaning of the verse that says, for the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek Torah from his mouth, for he's an angel of the Lord of hosts? A verse in Malachi, the verse teaches, if the rabbi is similar to an angel of the Lord of hosts, seek Torah from his mouth. If not, don't seek Torah from his mouth. There's a clear verse in Malachi that the Talmud learns out from, that the only teacher you should be choosing for yourself is the one who represents God, represents an angel, represents the Torah. Someone you can trust in. He's going to be a healthy influence on you. And if someone is doubtful, or if you're certain that they're not an angel of God, you're not allowed to drink from their mouth. It's not healthy for you. Not physically, not spiritually healthy for you. How could Reb Meir remain a student of Acher? Listen to this answer. Rabbi Bar Shela found Elijah the prophet, who appeared to him. He said to Elijah, what is the Holy One, blessed be he doing now? What's God doing? Right? You ever wondered? What's God doing right now? What's God doing right now? Huh? So he asked Elijah the prophet. So what did Elijah answer? He's stating halachot transmitted by all the sages, but in the name of Rabbi Meir, he will not speak. God is enjoying all the learning going on, and he's quoting Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Nachman. He's quoting all the sages, but he never quotes Rabbi Meir. Why? He asked him. Because he learned halachot from the mouth of Acher. God is angry with Rabbi Meir. Everything Rabbi Meir says is from his teacher, from Acher. We're not going to repeat those opinions in heaven. So God quotes everyone except for Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi, the son of Shila, who was talking to Elijah the prophet, he tells him, no, you don't understand him. Don't judge him unfavorably. Rabbi Meir found a pomegranate, ate its contents while throwing away its peel. Pomegranate is a hard fruit to eat. All fruits, many fruits, you have to remove. A banana, an orange, you got to take the fruit and remove the peel. Pomegranate is even harder. Getting those seeds are covered from all sides with that white peel. Taking out the seeds is very, very difficult. Right? And very often when we eat the seeds, we're eating some peel together with it. Could you imagine? You're able to skillfully extract just the fruit and remove all of the peel. It's hard. Rabbi Meir could do it. And he was taking all of the fruits from Acher, but he was leaving and discarding the peels. Rabbi Meir knows how to be, there's something called selective learning. Right? Selective hearing, which our children, or we all have, right? So this selective learning also, there's a phrase, Kabel et ha'emet mimish amro. Accept the truth from whoever's saying it. Sometimes somebody comes to you and they preach very righteously, happens all the time in synagogues or wherever. And they say, don't you know, you should be doing this, you're not allowed to do that, whatever. And what's your reaction? So you say, you're telling me this? Who the heck are you? Let's not talk about you. I know about you, and I know what you were doing yesterday, and I know where you were last night, and you're preaching to me? So, that's not a good reaction, even if it's true. There's a concept, accept the truth from wherever it's coming from. If someone tells you something and it's true, even if they're not the right person, not the authentic person to be transmitting that truth, you have to accept it, because why getting angry at the person? If the truth is true, accept the truth. So now that's the concept of separating the message from the messenger. So with Acher, he was transmitting amazing Torah. But inside that Torah was probably a lot of first of all, his sinful self, and a lot of his own mishigasim and shtick and theological confusions. And the average students who would have learned from Acher would have been very influenced by it. Would have taken the fruit, the peel, the whole thing, and received a messy Torah. But Meir received the pure fruit. He knew how to discard all of the peels. Now, we'll talk more about that in a moment. So does God accept that explanation or not? He says, Elijah tells him, your defense has been accepted by God. You know why? Because what's God teaching now? He just started teaching an opinion of Rabbi Meir. This is the first time he's quoting Rabbi Meir in heaven. What was the teaching? I don't want to go into it. It's relevant, but yeah, let's learn the teaching. When a person suffers, in the Torah there's a death penalty, right? One of them is called hanging. You hang someone. We don't know if it ever happened or not, because death penalty was very, very rare, if ever, because the rabbis made it so difficult to ever arrive at a death penalty, but there are death penalties. But the Torah says, when you hang someone, so if you go to Iran and they hang people from those cranes, let them hang there for like weeks, right? They hang there for days. Why? Because they want everyone to see it. What happens when you see it? You get scared, right? The Torah says you're not allowed to let a body hang overnight. You have to remove the body before nightfall of the day he was killed. There's a level of respect. True, he was guilty. True, he was killed. But he's still a Jewish person, still got a holy body. You have to go bury the body. It's called kavod hamet. You have to respect and honor even the deceased, even that person. That's the law. So Rabbi Meir taught this law. And God said, if the Holy One, blessed be He, suffered such an extent over the blood of the wicked, how much more should He suffer over the blood of the righteous that is spilled? Rabbi Meir taught this law, and then God says, if He cares so much about the body of the blood that was spilled of the wicked person, how much more so Rabbi Meir, we should care about him also. And I hear your defense. He's like eating a pomegranate, taking the fruit, discarding the peel, and in fact, God starts to quote Torah in the name of Rabbi Meir. What does that mean? What's this metaphor of the pomegranate? And by the way, also, just a simple question. What does the Talmud say? He ate the contents, he ate the fruit, and then threw away the peel. Is that the right order? When you eat a pomegranate, what's the order? You first take the peel off, and then you eat the fruit. You can't eat the fruit and then discard the peel. What does that mean? There's something about this order. Because in order to understand this, to understand Rabbi Meir's skill, and a lesson that we're going to take away very powerful, we need to understand more about who this Rabbi Meir was. We learned in the beginning a lot of great things about him. But I want to show you 2 or 3 amazing things about him that we're going to see a pattern. We're going to learn about what an incredible person he was. Okay? So go to page 3. Second source, from the Medrash. This is a very peculiar story. You know, in Bereshit, after Adam and Chava, they were naked, and then they ate from the tree, and then they realized that they're naked, so they have to put clothes on, right? So the Torah says, and the Lord God made for Adam and his wife katnot or, garments of or, of skin, of leather, and he dressed them. Maybe they went and killed some animals, they skinned them, and they had leather garments. Now the Hebrew says katnot or with an ayin. Or means leather, hide. Now we said before, Rabbi Meir was a scribe, was a sofer, yeah? So he wrote his own Torah scroll. In his Torah scroll, he wrote some things different than any other Torah scroll. How could that be? One letter that's a mistake makes the whole Torah scroll possible, invalid. Well, look, in the Torah of Rabbi Meir, it was found written that God made for them katnot or, garments of or, but not or with an ayin, which means leather, but or with an aleph. Aleph is or, light. Garments of light. Huh? Oraya. Oraya. So it's like Meir also. I'll tell you a story about that actually after. Beautiful. I have a son, Meir. Oraya. Beautiful. Uriah you have in the Talmud. Yeah. Okay. So what does it mean? First of all, how could a Meir have a different letter in the Torah scroll? And what does it mean, garments of light? Light's not going to keep you very warm. What are garments of light? Light's not very protective. It sounds like it's very translucent, transparent. Huh? So a kind of purity. Okay, but let's think about this. What is this? Or with an ayin and or with an aleph? Light, hide, leather? What's going on up here? And remember, his name is Meir. His name is light. He illuminates. Let's go further. Another passage in the Talmud. Next one. Rabbi, the son of Kavannah, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it's forbidden to write one letter from a copy. Say from a copy. When you're writing a Torah, you ever saw a scribe write a Torah scroll? Or a Megillah or a Mezuzah? You ever saw? So what are they doing? They're copying off another text. They have the other text in front of them and they're copying off. You're not allowed to write a Torah off by heart. Why? What's the obvious reason? You make a mistake. Remember, today we have digitally saved copies of the Torah in the cloud somewhere, right? Torah's forever. But think about before the printing press and before the cloud existed. The only Torahs we had were all handwritten. What are the odds that a handwritten text for 3,000 years is going to remain authentic? What are the chances of that? Impossible. But a lot of safeguards, a lot of laws were put into place. So one of the laws were that you have to copy off another Torah directly. Is that a foolproof safeguard? No. But there were many other safeguards as well. But the point being is that we went to so much effort to make sure that the Torah that Moshe got is the same Torah that we have. Now, by the way, it's not. We don't know for sure if it is. Maybe a couple questions. Even Rabbi Meir's Torah is a question. He spelled the letter very differently. But here we have a question. So the law says you're not allowed to write a Torah by heart. Now, listen to the story. The following was cited in opposition. Rabbi Shimon Eliezer stated, happened once. The Rabbi Meir was traveling in Asia, maybe it's Asia, and there was no Megillah there. Purim was coming. He didn't have a Megillah. What do you do? He sat down and he wrote by heart the whole Megillah. He knew it. Now, that's a great memory. Fantastic person. But what's the question? You're not allowed to do that. You can't remember the Torah by heart. How could he do that? The Rabbi answered, Rabbi Meir is different. Because to him could be applied the verse, your eyelids shall look straight before you. What does that mean? Your eyelids should look straight before you. So Rabbi Chama asked, what does that mean? And he answered. He replied, this refers to the words of the Torah, of which it's written, when you direct your eyes from it and it's gone. It's an expression. Torah is very fragile. Our memories are very fragile. So we can learn something. Never think to yourself, I learned it, I know it, I have it, I've mastered it, I'm good, I'm going to move on, and sort of forget about immersing in it. The moment you close your eyes, right? The moment you close your eyes, the moment you turn away, you're going to start to forget things. It's like a muscle. Your soul, your mind, like a muscle also. The moment you stop working out, your muscle starts to atrophy. You lose it, right? The moment you close your eyes and you divert your attention from Torah, you start forgetting right away. That is the average person. Rabbi Meir was an exception. He never forgot the Torah. The simple meaning is he never forgot it. Meaning, him we can trust, he can write the Torah even heart, and we know it's going to be correct. It's more than that. There's a story. There were two great rabbis in the town of Dvin, go back 100 years ago. And one of them was known as the Rabbi going, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, was a great, maybe you've heard of him. The other one was Rabbi Meir Simcha of Dvin. He was the chief rabbi of the town. Two of them, by the way, did not see eye to eye. They didn't always get along. They were very different kinds of people. And they were both great Torah scholars. One of the Rogatchover's great skills or great values was that he had an unbelievable memory. Okay, so when you wrote to him a question, he would, without even looking at sources, he would write right away. He would quote this page of Talmud and that page of Talmud, and he would say, he knew everything. He was brilliant. But Meir Simcha once said about him, he said a nice thing about him. He said, people think that the Rogatchover has a good memory. No, it's not true. That isn't a good memory. What does memory mean? Memory means I learned something a year ago, yesterday, 5 years ago, and I remember it today. Rogatchover didn't remember anything. He was always seeing the Torah in front of him. The whole Torah, every single page, every small line. He wasn't remembering anything. He was always at the forefront of his mind. He was thinking about everything all the time. It's not memory. Rabbi Meir is the same. He didn't remember the whole Torah. He saw the whole Torah in front of him all the time. So who was Rabbi Meir? There's a Hasidic discourse from the Maggid of Mezrich, Rav Dov Ber, the successor of the student of the Baal Shem Tov. He says, you know who Rabbi Meir was? Huh? No, Rabbi Ber was a grandson. But this is the Rav Dov Ber, the student of the Baal Shem Tov, and the successor, became the Mezrich Maggid. He writes this from the spiritual perspective. He says, you know who Meir was? All the sages in his time were on the level of Chachma. They were on the level of the highest levels of wisdom. And their access to Torah was very deep, which is why we study their words. They're the masters of Halakha, the Talmud, because they were on the level of Chachma, the highest of spiritual levels. Rabbi Meir was on a higher level, even higher than average Chachma, higher than average wisdom. Rabbi Meir was on the level of the source of wisdom. When you're on the level of the source of wisdom, you can see through wisdom in a very different way. You're not bound to a particular wisdom because you are the source of the wisdom. This is the light. This is the aura, the light that Rabbi Meir was talking about. That Rabbi Meir was. Even take from his Torah scroll, the or with an ayin, the leather became light. By the way, what's the whole idea of life? What's the whole idea of studying Torah? What is a Torah? The Torah of Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem is to purify the world, purify character, right? It's symbolized by taking a piece of leather, a hide of the back of an animal, which is pure, coarse, physical substance, and you elevate it, and you make it holy, and you purify it. You write a Torah scroll out of it, which you study, and you make a blessing, and you put it in the synagogue, and you give it a kiss. You've turned something very physical into something very spiritual. All the time, you do that with your tefillin. You do it with your mezuzah. You do it with your whole life. Your house. Your house is just bricks and mortar, right? And nice furnishings and nice ceiling, nice lights. It's all very physical. It's all materialistic. What are you going to do with it, though? Is it going to just turn you into a materialistic person, or are you going to learn how to turn something holy? Imagine you use this home and this beautiful light that you spend the chandelier $1,000 on. What do you do with it? With the light? You host gifts. You make Shabbos meals. You have a Torah class. You use it to advance more spiritual beauty in your life and life of others. Now you've taken a piece of pure materialistic something and you've turned it into something holy. Rabbi Meir did that to the extent that he changed the letter in his Torah into an aleph with an aura. Light. Rabbi Meir knew how to see deep into things, deeper than the way the average person sees it. That's how you bring out the light in something. The fruit is covered by the peel. Most people see the peel, that's it, and it's blocked. Can't see behind it. Meir saw the fruit behind the peel. Actually, you know why he saw the fruit behind the peel? Because the peel was not blocking him. To him, the peel was not opaque. It was transparent. He saw through it. The leather became became a light. Nothing got in the way. Rabbi Meir knew how to see through all the veils, all the things that are trying to block truth and block reality, which most of us get distracted by. Rabbi Meir saw right through it. Oh! That's the whole point. Amazing. Most people, everybody except for Meir who saw Acher, what did they see? An outcast, a rasha, a sinner, a wicked person, excommunicated from the community. He doesn't belong over here. He's a danger. He was a danger, by the way. But Meir saw more. When you have, it could be a child, it could be a friend. Imagine somebody acts out against you, curses out at you. One day, comes to you with attitude and curses you and all kinds, right? How do you react? So most of us react to them like, what the heck? And we send them flying. Get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. If that's what you see, when somebody's acting out and you see them as being this nasty, evil, wicked person, that's how they appear. You're looking at the peel. If you were Rabbi Meir, you know what you would be saying? Whoa, hold on a minute. I hear what you're saying. You're saying really not nice, curse, humiliating things to me. I get it. And I could be hurt by it. What is going on? What's the real story? Why are you behaving like that? So there's three levels. Level number one, when all you see is the peel. And many people live life just seeing peels. They judge people very externally. They judge situations very externally, circumstances very externally. Something bad happens to them. This person hates me, God hates me, whatever. They give up. Everything is very external. They take things at face value. A deeper level is people who know how to say, no. Don't get caught by the truth. What's really happening here? What's this person really about? What's going on? You're in pain. You're suffering. Can I help you? What's right? So I'm hurt. I don't like what's happening, but I learn to look deeper. Right? Something bad happens to me in life. Instead of saying, God, why'd you do this? Why do I deserve it? I say, whoa. What's happening? Maybe there's a lesson over here. Maybe there's a message. Maybe God is pushing me. Maybe God is stretching my spiritual muscles because I'm trying to grow over here. And there, it's not that he sees the external appearance and learns to look deeper. He doesn't see anything else. He never saw leather. He never saw the facade. He never saw the external peel. That's why the Talmud doesn't say, right? We said, first you take the peel, then you eat the fruit. But the Talmud says, Rabbi Meir, like a pomegranate, he ate the fruit and discarded the shell. How can he eat the fruit first? the metaphor. The mayor, he ate the fruit directly because there was no appeal for him. Yeah. So what's real? So what's the truth over there? You're saying, how can we explain Acher that way? So you could only see good, and it could be a naive. The question was, if you only see good all the time, those are like naive people. So I think there's two kinds of good. There's a naive look at what is good, or there's the truth of what's really good. Let's be careful. This is Rabbi Meir. This is Rabbi Meir, and only, and in other words, most other people, because they were not Meir, they actually could not befriend Achi. And we're not faulting them. They could not befriend him. They saw him for what he was, a sinner, a wicked person. Rabbi Meir was gifted. He was unique. He lived on a different level. That's why nobody understood his wisdom either. When he spoke Torah, he was speaking the truth of the truth of the truth from the greatest of depths. We don't understand things that way, that deep. We can't comprehend. We can't see things that deep. So we can't even rule the halacha like you because we don't live on that level. Other rabbis spoke to us. Rabbi Meir spoke to a truth to a level that nobody could understand. So we're not Rabbi Meir. But we can learn from him. So why did God not know about him and then later find out about him? Why did God originally think not to be quoting Rabbi Meir and then later be convinced about the pomegranate that he can quote him? You have to ask God. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you this. We're already at, here's the deal. Because we're already at time. Normally I end now. And I think we've learned the message. If you want to stay for 5 more minutes, I'll tell you the last teaching from the Arizal. Very Kabbalistic, very amazing. You got 5 more minutes? Okay. I'll make it worth it, I promise you. Look at this amazing teaching of Rabbi Meir himself. There's one place in the whole Torah where Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, is mentioned by his name. Maybe 2 places, but one place in the Mishnah. It's not called Acher, it's called his name. Where is it? In Pirkei Avot. Where does he teach? Elisha, the son of Avuya, would say, he would teach. One who learns Torah in his childhood, what is it comparable to? To ink inscribed on fresh paper. One who learns Torah in old age, what's it compared to? Ink inscribed on erased paper. You have nice clean paper, you write ink, it stays there. You have a piece of leather, right? In those days, it's been erased 5 times and it's been rubbed and it's been smudged, and you put ink on it, it doesn't stick so well. So when you study as a child, it gets knocked into your head, it's with you forever. When you try to study at an older age, forget, right? Elisha ben Avuya taught that. What's the connection to him, to his life? There's a connection. Look at Rabbi Meir saying. In Hebrew, it's Al tistakel bakankan, ele b'ma sheyesh bo. Don't look at the bottle, look at what's inside. Don't judge a book by its cover. Look not at the vessel, but what it contains. There are new vessels that are filled with old wine, and old vessels don't even contain new wine. You think it's an old vessel, you're getting a 30-year wine? Could be nothing, could be garbage in there. You think it's a vessel that doesn't look right. You never know. Don't judge by the externals. That's what Rabbi Meir told. Now, makes a lot of sense, right? We learn Rabbi Meir. Now we know that. He never judged bottles. He never judged book covers. He never saw things the way they appeared to be. He always saw the aura, the light, the fruits behind the peel. Always. Right? Okay. The Arizal teaches deeper, Kabbalistically. You heard of the Arizal. the great Kabbalist, Rabbi Isaac Luria, 500 years ago. And the Torah follows. The Torah says, "V'nakeh lo yinakeh." When a person sins, right? And when the Jews sinned with the golden calf, v'nakeh lo yinakeh, and cleansed, they won't be cleansed. Literally means, and they won't be accepted for the Teshuvah. Some people, to such a degree, like God wants the nation that worship the golden calf, or some people that stoop so low that God says, we can't forgive you anymore. And Acher was that kind of person. Most people said about Acher, even the heavenly voice came out and said, Acher, you can't do the Teshuvah anymore. You've gone so far off the deep end, there's no way you're coming back. Rizal says, look at the words v'nakeh lo yinakeh. The words v'nakeh and yinakeh. Because it's a strange expression. V'nakeh lo yinakeh. V'nakeh and yinakeh, they both have two of the same letters. Which letters? Kuf and nun. Kuf and nun, they share. Rabbi, the passage not there, I didn't quote it. V'nakeh is vav nun kuf hey, yinakeh, yud nun kuf hey. They both share nun and kuf. And the difference is that the first one is a vav and a hey at the beginning of the end, and the second one has a yud and a hey at the beginning of the end. V'nakeh lo yinakeh. Vav hey, yud hey. What are those four letters? The name of God. What's the kuf and the nun? The kuf and the nun? Kankan. I'll talk about kankan. Kankan is the bottle. Don't look at the bottle. Look what's inside. Okay. Now, wait, you haven't finished. You have Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, God's name. Now, there are many names to God, right? Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, Elohim, Kel, Shakai, right? Many names to God. But Kabbalistically, there are four descriptions of God's name. Ma, Ban, Sag, Av. Ma, Mem, Hey, 45. Ban, Base Nun, 52. Sag, 63. Av, 72. There are numbers that are four different kinds of names of God. Where are these numbers coming from? 45, 52, 63, 72. Well, they're all increments of 9, by the way. And 9 is a very... Emet is 9. Aleph, Mem, Taf, 1, 40, 400, 144 is 9. Well, the number 9 in math, we know, is the magical number. Well, it's the number of God also. But let's not get carried away over here. When you take the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, right? And you spell out the letters of God's name. If you take the letter Yud and you spell... How do you spell Yud? Yud, Vav, Dalet. How do you spell Hey? Hey, Aleph. How do you spell Vav? Vav, Aleph, Vav. How do you spell the next Hey? Hey, Aleph. If you add up the numerical value of all the ways that you spell God, what number do you get? Yud, K, Vav, K is 26. But if you add up the math of Yud, Vav, Dalet, Hey, Aleph, Vav, Aleph, Vav, Hey, Aleph, which is the way you spell the letters in full, what do you get? So it depends actually how you spell the letters. Yud could be Yud Vav Dalet or Yud Dalet. Hey could be Hey Aleph, Hey Hey, Hey Yud. You can spell them in different ways, which is how you get the four names of 45, 52, 63, 45, 72, 72. The four different numbers depends on how you spell God's name. The most classical one is the Shem Ma. The name called Ma. Ma is 45. The most simple way of spelling God's name, Yud Vav Dalet, Hey Aleph, Vav, Aleph, Vav, Hey Aleph, spells 45. But you arrive at those numbers not when you look at the Yud K, Vav K from the surface value, but you look deep into them. You look into the letters behind them. Look in the way they're actually spelled out. It's not, you don't see it. You've got to look deep into it to find it. Says here by Meir, Al Tistakel, but Kankan. Don't look at the Kankan. The Kankan is the two letters of V'nakeh lo yinakeh, which says you can never be clean. Ella, rather, B'ma. Look at the Ma inside. What's the Ma? The Ma is the 45 numerical value name of God of Yud K Vav K. But the only way you arrive at that is by looking deep behind into the letters. This is Rabbi Meir's teaching. You know why I stayed with an acher? Because I didn't look at the bottle. I looked at the map. I looked at what's inside. I found God, and here's the message for all of us. To find God in the expected places in life, to find God in the people we expect to have God, to find God in the experiences and the places we expect to find God, no. Anybody can do that. But do you want to be like Rabbi Meir? Figure out how you can find God in people, in places, in situations that you least expect to find. You can find God there, then you are Meir. You bring light to your life and to the people around you. Thanks for joining us, my friends. Have a good night. Next week, same time, same place, same channel.